In this tutorial, we are going to be focusing on the glial cells. When we say the glial cells, they are also known as neuroglia or simply glia. They are non-neuronal cells in the nervous systems that provide support and protection to the neurons. According to the definition which I just gave right now, if you notice here I have two underlying words. The first one is the nervous systems and the second one is the neuron. Let's take a quick revision on the nervous system. The nervous system comprises of two main components, which is the CNS and PNS. The CNS simply stands for central nervous system, and the PNS simply stands for peripheral nervous system. And the CNS, which is the central nervous system, comprises of two things, which is the brain and the spinal cord. And this is the roughly sketch of the brain, and the other one, which is the down part, is the roughly sketch of the spinal cord. And the spinal cord, remember, we have what we call the CTSL, which is the cervical, the thoracic, the sacral, and we have the lumbar. From the definition of the glial cells which we gave here, apart from the nervous system, the next thing that pulls our attention is the neurons. Let's dive in and look at what is neurons. Here is a roughly sketch of what we call the brain. And inside of the brain, if you look at it closely, you can see some lines which we call them cell. And these lines, some of them are in yellow, some of them are in white, and some of them are in light blue, some of them are in orange color. I refer these to call them different type of cells. But the most important one which we are focusing on today is the neurons. If you zoom inside here, we have the neurons, and neurons, they are special type of cells which are found in the brain. That is why, according to definition, neurons are basic building blocks of the nervous systems which are responsible for transmitting information through the body. Here is a roughly sketch of the neurons. But the main part which I need you to understand, or which I need you to focus on, is this part where we have oligodendrocyte. It's supposed to be oligodendrocyte. There is a mistake here. Oligodendrocyte, and here we have what we call the axon. And this part, this region, is the head, and this one is the tail. The tail where we have the axon terminal. Notice that here we have axon, axon, axon. But this part is the axon, and this is axon hillock, and this is axon terminal. That is the last part, more like the tails. And remember, as we mentioned, we said the neurons are the brain main cells. And where are these neurons coming from? They are coming from the brain. And according to the definition of a computer, which says is an instrument which is capable of accepting data, processing data to give out information. Same applies to neurons. We can say they are specialized cells that can receive, process, and transmit electrical and chemical signals, which is more like different. Remember, we said, and here we have what? We have the oligodendrocyte, which are attached to this sheet, which we are going to explain more as inside this video. Remember, from the definition here we have, which we said the glial cells are also known as neuroglia or simply glia. They are non-neuronal cells in the nervous systems that provide support and protection to neurons. And we dived in to look at what are neurons, and this is what we found to be the neurons, which we said they are specialized cells that can receive and process and even transmit electrical and chemical signals. And these neurons are being found from the brain, and we said the neurons are the brain main cells, meaning that there are other cells inside of the brain, but the main important, important cells in the brain are what we call the neurons. Just imagine that the brain is more like a factory, and the head manager inside that factory is the neuron. That is why we call it the brain main cells. And you know that just the manager, him alone, cannot perform all the duties required in that factory. He needs to work together with some other workers. If that manager is a human, meaning that the workers are also going to be human. Since the neurons is a cell, his workers are also going to be cells. And these are the workers. We have different type of workers and they have different structure. And those workers, we call them the glial cells. And the workers are also divided into two, which are more like the male and the female. But in this case, we call them the microglia and macroglia. What I'm trying to explain here is this. If you notice here, we have like 2 to 3 different segments. First thing we explain the brain, which is number 1 here. Secondly, inside of the brain, we have some different type of cells. And here, we grab the neurons. And we have explained that. Since we say the neurons is the main cell, neuron alone cannot work. It binds together with other cells that help it to perform a lot of actions inside. But we can, let's say here is the head manager, but it has a very great respect compared to the other cells. And we said we have the glial cells. Under the glial cells, they are composed, or the component of the glial cells are microglia and macroglia. And under them, we have the mnemonic, which I call same organization. The S simply stands for Schwann cells, and the A simply stands for astrocyte, M is microglial, E ependymal cells, and the organization simply stands for oligodendrocytes. Those are the mnemonics which I use in order for me to easily memorize those cells. We said the first one is the Schwann cells, astrocyte, microglia, ependymal cells, and the last one, which is kind of tough, but let's manage to call it oligodendrocyte. Since we call the glial cells as a group of workers which work for a specific or a particular factory, and that factory is called the brain, and the manager inside the brain or the main cells inside the brain is what we call the neurons. In this case, let's look at the structure and the functions of these workers. The first we have on the list, I still arrange it same organization, SAME, an organization, which is oligodendrocytes. So the first one, we have the Schwann cells, and this is the structure of the Schwann cell. The next thing we have on the list is astrocyte, and here we have microglia, and this we have the ependymal cells, and this is the shape of the oligodendrocyte, which is organization. But I needed to remember one thing. Since all these cells work for one particular organization, which is the nervous system, and the nervous system is being divided into two. We have the CNS, which is the central nervous system, and the PNS, which is the peripheral nervous system. These workers we have here, which are the astrocyte, microglia, ependymal, etc., they work for different segment or different unit of that particular factory or that particular industry. So we have the satellite cells and the Schwann cells. They only work for the peripheral nervous system, and the rest, the 4 of them, which is the microglia, astrocyte, ependymal, and these last 2, which is the astrocyte and oligodendrocyte, they all work for the central nervous system. You need to put that down. Let's look at the function of the oligodendrocyte. If you pay close attention to the neurons which you have, let's assume this is the neurons, though we have got the 2 edges. If you pay closely attention to these neurons, you realize here, this sheet which we have is what we call the myelin sheet. And those oligodendrocytes, they are responsible for producing this myelin sheet along the axons. Because we have, if you notice here on the top, when we talk about the neurons, here we have the axon terminal, and here we have the axons. Everything here is the axons, but this is oligodendrocyte, which I'm talking about previously. This is the sheet that tied the entire axons. It's what we call the myelin sheet. And what produces that myelin sheet is the oligodendrocyte. So this is it. Let's take a quick revision once more. We said if you notice here in the oligodendrocyte, they produce what? The myelin sheath is being produced by the oligodendrocyte. They produce that along the axons. Okay, the reason why I'm writing these cells, because this oligodendrocyte can only be found inside those cells. And those cells are what we call the neurons. If you zoom inside of the cells, and we know there's most of the cells, they have Golgi apparatus, the mitochondria, the vehicles, etc., etc. If you zoom inside of that cells, you're going to see the oligodendrocyte, which is being attached on the, what do you call it, on the nerves. Sorry, not nerves, neurons rather. As we said earlier, we said the central nervous system is being divided into two, which is the brain and the spinal cord. They are responsible for producing myelin sheath that insulate the axons in the central nervous system. This one which we have is what we call the Schwann cells formation, or the process of the Schwann cells. They are just similar to this oligodendrocyte. The only difference is that they take place in the PNS, which is the peripheral nervous systems. And in this case, each Schwann cells wrap around a single axon segment to form myelin sheath. What we have, the third one, is what we call the astrocyte. And these astrocytes are responsible, or they provide structural support to neurons and help to regulate extracellular environment. And they involve in neurotransmitter recycling, ion balance, and blood-brain barriers. Here we have the microglia. These microglia, they are the resident immune cells of the central nervous systems, and they are responsible for monitoring the brain environment and responding to injury or infection. They can engulf and remove debris, pathogens, and dead cells through the process called phagocytosis.